Alright, so we are looking at grains, rice, and pasta. So the first thing we're going to talk a little bit about are grains. Now, definition of grain, single hard seed. Most common forms of grains that we consume will come from wheat, corn, or rice. Just think of Chex. Wheat Chex, corn Chex, and rice Chex. So, kernel of wheat. On the outside, you have the husk. It's that coating, that shell on the outside. We break that away. Now we have parts of the grain. So we have the kernel, which is the whole grain. It makes up the seed of the plant. We just talked about that, the husk, the outer husk. Then we have the bran. This is the outer skin that protects the core from sunlight and pests. The health benefits from the bran. It provides us with antioxidants, B vitamins, and fiber. So when you have things that are high fiber, they're usually the bran is intact and it's crushed down. It's not bleached away, not taken away. So bran is important. Endosperm. This is the seed's food supply. This is where starch is stored in the wheat, and it has the largest amount of flour, or this is where the largest amount of flour comes from. Health benefits. This is your starchy carbohydrates. You have protein, vitamins, and minerals inside the endosperm. Then we have the germ. This is the embryo that will sprout into another plant if fertilized by pollen. Health benefits here, you got vitamin B, protein, minerals, and healthy fats. So, what is whole grain? Whole grains are made from the entire kernel, including the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. When you break that down and you take it to the mill, you refine those grains. So refined grains are milled so that the germ and the bran is removed. So what you just have left is the endosperm. Then we have enriched. So after all that milling, you lose a lot of nutrients. So what you're going to do is you're going to replace those nutrients lost during that process, and you get a new product. So an example of that would be white flour. The bran has been bleached, all that nutrients have been removed. Then they enrich it so that you get some vitamins and minerals back into it, but it's not naturally occurring. It's replenished. So why do whole grains matter? You might hear whole grain diet. This product has whole grain. So why is it important? So when you look at diets that are rich in whole grain foods and other plants food, it's going to have lower saturated fat, lower cholesterol, and it may help reduce the risk of heart disease. So doctors and nutritionists recommend consuming at least 3 or more ounces of whole grains a day, and that can help reduce the risk of some chronic diseases. It also helps you with weight management, gives you a high fiber diet. Your diet will be lower in fat. You'll have more high vitamin B's, calcium, and other minerals. Alright, so we're going to look more into wheat. Common wheat, this is used for flours, just your basic white flour. Durum wheat is a type of wheat that has high protein and high gluten contents. So when you break those down, you get salmonella flour. This is the endosperm only of durum wheat, and from that you get couscous, and most Italian pastas that are yellow in color are made from semolina flour. Bulgur, you're going to get cracked durum wheat that has been parboiled, dried, and then cracked. Spelt is a type of wheat. So, pasta is usually made from durum wheat because it is high protein and has high gluten, which makes for a nice tender chew to your pasta. When we cook pasta, which we will do probably when we get back from Thanksgiving, when we cook pasta, you're going to test for doneness. You want to make sure that it is al dente, meaning it is firm to tooth. It's not crunchy, but it does have a little bit of firmness in the bite. Rules for cooking pasta: pasta doubles as it cooks. So if you start with 1 cup of pasta that's uncooked, you're going to yield 2 cups cooked pasta. To cook pasta, you want to make sure you have a nice large pot of water, and you want to bring it to a boil. You want to add salt. You want to add quite a bit of salt. This is where you flavor your pasta. Once water is boiling, you're going to add your pasta. You're going to cook for roughly 10 minutes. It really depends on what type of pasta you're cooking and how thick that is. If you're using regular spaghetti, it's going to cook a lot longer than, say, Angel Hare's pasta. So you do want to keep an eye on that. You want to test it not by throwing it against the wall, not by throwing it against your kitchen mate. You want to taste pasta. Again, you're looking for al dente, and it really depends on what you're going to do with that. So if you're going to finish cooking that pasta, say in a soup or in a sauce, you want it to be on the heavily al dente spectrum. If you're going to just toss it with a little bit of garlic butter and serve it as it is, you want it on the less al dente spectrum. Some people say toss it with oil to prevent from sticking. That is a myth. Yes, it will prevent your pastas from sticking to each other, but the best thing to do is when you drain your pasta, reserve some of that pasta water. It's starchy, it's got lots of flavor in it. Set that aside. Let your pasta sit until you're finished, whatever, and then pour that pasta water back over your noodles and toss it. They will not stick anymore, and you'll have that starch so that when you add your sauce to your pasta, it won't become an oil slick and your sauce won't just slide off. So rinsing your pasta or adding oil to your pasta will cause your noodles to be very slippery and your sauce won't adhere to it. So I do want to just tell you not to toss it with oil, but I'm not going to take it out of this PowerPoint because I want you to see what a common ingredient or instruction may look like and why you shouldn't do that. Alright, so other grains, we have our less popular grains. We have barley, oats, and rye, and then we have some very uncommon grains, and we have quinoa, buckwheat. Also other uncommon grains, this would fall under your ancient grains. You have freekeh, and you have farro, and you have things like spelt. So they're becoming more common than they used to be. You may find in your cereal aisle, you'll find Cheerios has ancient grain Cheerios. Alright, so looking at some of your less popular grains, barley, the benefits of barley is that it does contain all 8 amino acids, which is wonderful, especially if you are a vegetarian. It's according to recent study, eating whole grain barley can help regulate blood sugar for up to 10 hours after you consume it. Oats, it's going to contain more soluble fibers than any other grains. It results in slower digestion, and it helps you feel full for longer periods of time. So oats, like oatmeal in the morning, great way to start your morning because it makes you feel full for a longer period of time, and it also helps with your fiber intake. Another less popular grain, we have rye. Rye is commonly made into flour, and you turn that flour into rye to make rye bread. It is a very potent flavored flour if you've ever had rye bread before. Some uncommon grains, quinoa. These are seeds that are covered in a bitterness, which helps prevent insects and birds from eating it. Quinoa is high protein, and it balanced set of amino acids. While buckwheat has no gluten, and it is not related to wheat. If you've ever seen any kasha in the cereal section, kasha is roasted buckwheat that's been ground or cracked. Alright, so processing grains. When you get grains, you get the berries, the whole grain that's taken out the hull. So it's just the whole grains minus the hull. Then you have flour, and you grind that into a fine powder, rolled and flaked. You take I'm going to say oats, and you roll it, and it's flattened between rollers, which gives you rolled oats. Cracked, you cut into small pieces to speed up the cooking process, and then we have pearled. This is where the bran is removed and tumbled. Alright, so now we're looking at rice. Rice is one of the staples in the world. More than 40,000 different varieties of rice span the planet. It is relatively easy to grow, and it is found in, I believe, most of the continents. I don't think you can grow rice in Antarctica, but I never tried. So basic categories of rice. We have long grain rice. These are going to be long, polished kernels. They're bland and somewhat firm in texture. They're going to yield a drier, fluffier rice. So example of this would be basmati rice and jasmine rice. It does have a little bit of perfume to it. They're actually really quite good. You'll find long grain rice in Indian cuisine from, say, Indian. Medium grain rice has a shorter, wider kernel, 2 to 3 times longer than its width, and it's cooked. It becomes moist and tender, and it has a greater tendency to cling together than the long grain. When I lived in Hawaii, we call this sticky rice, because when you ended up with it, it was a white rice that was sticky. You'll find this in Chinese restaurants. You use it for sushi rice. Next, we have short grain rice. Short grain rice has a short, plump, almost round kernel, and when you cook it, it are soft and they cling together. An example of this would be arborio rice. And we take our arborio rice and we cook it with chicken stock, and we make risotto from it. It's very starchy, which gives it that nice creamy texture. So the nutritional differences of rice. We have several types of rice you can buy at the grocery store. We have brown rice. This is the whole grain form of rice with only the husks removed. Parboiled rice. This is steamed and passed through the grains with the husk still on. The nutrients are embedded into the grain by this procedure, so that makes it a little bit more healthier. The rice is polished after the steaming is done, and this is going to, like I said, have a more nutritious rice than just plain white rice, and it's more digestible rice than just plain brown rice. Next we have instant rice. It's par-cooked and then dehydrated. It cooks quickly, and the yield is doubled. One of the things about rice is people think wild rice is a form of rice, but wild rice is actually a grass, so it does not fall in this category, although it's very similar in looks. You'll cook them similarly, but wild rice does have a little bit of tendencies of being a little bit more seedier. Cooking rice, just keep in mind that rice pretty much follows this recipe of a 1-to-2 ratio. Most rices will go for the amount of water to ratio of rice. So for 1 cup of rice, you would use 2 cups of water. The directions to cook this would be: bring water to a boil, add and stir in rice, turn heat to low, put lid on, cook for 20-25 minutes, depending on what you're making, an hour. If it's brown rice, when there's no more water visible, the rice is done. Fluff with a fork. That's very, very general terms of cooking rice. You want to make sure that you don't lift the lid up. You want to keep the steam in there. There's all kinds of rice cookers out there on the market. I would highly suggest you purchasing one of those if you use rice a lot. Some of the things that can happen when cooking rice is that rice will burn on the bottom, and so some people don't particularly care to make just plain white rice on the stove top. Rice triples as it cooks, so you start off with 1 cup of rice. It's going to yield 3 cups of cooked rice. Alright, so for my rice pilaf, I am going to need 3/4 of a cup of long grain rice, 2 cups of chicken broth. I will need 1 onion, or actually 1/2 of an onion. Since this is a big onion, I'm going to actually just use 1/4 of it. And 1 tablespoon of butter. So that's what you're going to need for your rice pilaf. And I'm also going to be working on a risotto. And so for the risotto, you're going to need 3/4 of a cup of short grain rice or arborio rice and 2.5 cups of chicken broth. You'll also need some bell peppers for your risotto, and you will need 2 tablespoons of butter for your risotto. I think that's where we were. So right now I am just brunoising my peppers, and I love these in my risotto because it gives it nice color and it actually gives it a nice little flavor, a little sweetness to it. I think that's enough. Alright, so I'm going to start my risotto because it does take a while for it to cook. So I'm going to turn on my frying pan. I use a non-stick pan for this. I put my 1/2 tablespoon of butter. Remember, you're going to need about 2 tablespoons. So you start off with 1/2 tablespoon for your risotto. And you want to get this hot and get this going. Now for my rice pilaf, I am going to need a pot with a lid. I personally like the lid that has the glass top to it, but I only have one of these in the classroom, so one group will not have one. A regular lid, anything that gets it nice and sturdy and keeps that steam in is what you want. So if you need to find a pot to fit the specific lid, find a pot to fit the specific lid. You don't want to have a lid that's too big or too small because you want to keep all of that moisture and that steam in there because that's what cooks your rice for your rice pilaf. Now for your rice pilaf, you're going to take your tablespoon of butter and you're going to add that to the pan and we're going to turn that on. Now while those are melting, I am going to prep my onion, and you just want it minced, nothing specific.
For the risotto, could you use any kind of pepper?
You can use any kind of pepper. You can use any kind of vegetable. You can have no vegetables at all. This is what we used for competition last year, I think. So this is our go-to one.
I remember Sarah was making that.
Yeah. But I like these peppers because it gives a nice little sweetness to it. But if you had regular bell peppers, if you wanted to do mushrooms, you could definitely do mushrooms. Sometimes you just don't put anything in it and then just pair it with shrimp. Put shrimp on top or something like that. Alright, so that's enough. So I want to mince it, so I'm going to run my knife through it to get it really nice and small. Good. The one thing I like about making pilaf is once you get everything in that pan, it's done. You don't have to babysit it. The risotto, on the other hand, you have to babysit the risotto. Alright, so my risotto pan is nice and hot. I'm going to add my peppers to that. And I just want to soften my peppers. My pilaf is not there yet, so I'm going to turn that up just a tad bit. Always salt my vegetables. The pepper. You want to get that nice coated. So with that 1/2 tablespoon of butter in here, you want to coat and you want to saute your peppers. Now with your tablespoon of butter in here, it's melted, we're going to add our onions. Remember that's again, you want to get that coated and you want to salt and pepper your vegetables. One thing I always yell at you guys about is tasting and seasoning. You should always season your vegetables at every point that you possibly can. If you wait till the end to start seasoning, It's going to be overly salted, and it's not going to have that same Mary flavor.
You just had to have onions.
Yes, this is one I learned in culinary school, actually. All right, so once you're getting some nice color on your peppers,
I always forget you have the mirror to look at.
it's just going to be so pretty. The next thing we're going to do, what is this pan for? Risotto. So I'm going to add my risotto. My rice in there. And now I want to coat my rice, and I want to toast my rice ever slightly
Before you cook it.
before I cook it. Okay, so onions look delicious. I'm going to add my rice, my long grain rice, to my onions. Same thing. I want to coat it. This is where you get that. You'll have individual strands of rice opposed to that big old cluster of sticky rice. So by coating with that oil, they'll fluff up individually. And you'll also get a little bit of flavor. Alright. So this is my 2 cups of chicken broth. Typically the ratio for liquid to rice is 1 part rice, 2 parts liquid. You could use chicken broth, you can use vegetable broth, you can use beef broth, whichever kind of broth you want. And you want to bring that to a boil. Alright, so now I'm ready to add my liquid. Now ideally you would like to heat this up, but since I don't have an extra spot, I'm just going to go with it as it is. And I want to add it half a cup at a time for your risotto.
What would happen if you do all at once?
You would end up with soup. Because what we're trying to do here is cook the rice, but we're also going to get that starch to seep out of it. And that's what makes it that oatmeal consistency. So I'm going to turn it down to about medium-high. And it's going to start absorbing that liquid almost immediately. If you ever watch Hell's Kitchen, this is what they always mess up on, the risotto. Alright, so now
That's so true.
I'm going to add a half a cup more.
Is that the reason why we have so much chicken broth is for the risotto? Because it just soaks it up.
Yes. Why there's more chicken broth, there's a little bit more, yes.
I thought you meant where Miss J had so much.
I know, I was like, I don't know that much. So that's going to continue to cook, and I'm waiting for this to come to a boil. So on Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to partner you up, when you and your partner are making your rice, I want to watch you wait for this to come to a boil, because you want that boil before you cover it. Whenever you're working with chicken broth, you should always boil it before you taste it as well, because it could have botulism in it. It could have bad stuff.
Sounds lovely.
Sounds gross. Mighty tasty, I guess. It drives you crazy if you've ever read what happened with botulism.
I've never read about
Yeah, it's not fun. It's
What
a
happened?
very painful death.
it. Oh. There's no way to live with it if you get.
No, if you get botulism, you pretty much it's like a neurotoxin, and it will you'll go crazy, and your organs start shutting down.
This is like a horror movie.
Botulism 3D.
That's scary.
Looking good, and it's almost coming to a boil.
Just like a light boil or.
You want a rolling boil, because then you're going to turn it to a simmer. But you want to get that boiling first to kill any bacteria that may be festering in there.
Meanwhile,
I love risotto.
When you guys made last year at the restaurant, it was so good.
It was this one.
I might look at Hell's Kitchen and Iron Chef on my Dish Network so I can record them and watch them.
Yeah, definitely. Because you get to see different ingredients.
So far, all I watch is Chopped and Cooks vs. Collins.
Now, if you look at the rice, it's starting to get kind of sticky. It's the starches that are coming out, which is what we want. So now I'm gonna, all of my liquid has been absorbed for the most part. I'm gonna add another half a cup. This is one of the longest things to make. What restaurants do, they cook their rice till it's almost done, then they lay it out on a sheet tray and they put it in the refrigerator, and then when they cook it at restaurant night, they'll just add the hot liquid and it cooks it a lot faster because it's cooked. It's partially cooked already. Alright, so my rice is coming to a boil. I'm going to give it a little stir so nothing's sticking to the bottom. Okay, when I got a nice boil, I'm going to turn it to simmer, cover it, and just let it go. It's going to take about 20 to 30 minutes from that. So I should put my timer on, but let's see. Alright, so almost right when the bell rings.
And you don't do anything else?
You don't do anything else.
That's pretty easy.
It's very easy. So if you are working on the quiz / pilaf, you will start your pilaf first. While it's cooking, you're going to do your quiz. So as I continue to stir, you're getting that starch from your rice to kind of seep out, and it's going to make it a nice creamy sauce. Because there's absolutely no cream in this risotto. It all comes from the starches from the rice. And so by stirring it, you're aggravating those starches and you're getting them out. So that helps develop that nice texture that you want. Anna, can you get me a couple of tasting spoons? Alright, so my rice has absorbed most of that chicken broth. So now I'm going to add another half a cup. And again, when you're making risotto, it's beneficial to have hot chicken broth so it doesn't cool your pan down like it did mine. So usually we'll have a pan of chicken broth that's simmering. We'll just ladle it in. So you see how creamy it's starting to look? That's just starch from the rice and the chicken broth mixed together. So I'm going to taste this rice because it is very close to being done, but I think I might need some more liquid. Oh, it's actually really good. Still a little crunchy, so I'm going to add a little more liquid. Gently stir. And let it cook. So as I'm tasting my risotto, I know that my risotto is going to need a little bit more liquid. And I ran out of chicken stock, so I'm going to add a little water. Which is fine because the chicken stock is actually really salty. Okay, almost done. Alright, any questions about this section in the chapter? No? So, if you have not finished the study guide for section 2, that is your homework for the weekend. If you have not finished the assignment underneath the study guide, I think it's matching, that is your homework as well. So, just make sure you get that done because on Monday and Tuesday you will be having your chapter test, which includes your knife skills. It includes your chapter 11 section 2 quiz and your rice pilaf. So between those 2 days you'll be either on pilaf and quiz, and the next day you'll do your knife skills, or you do knife skills first and then the next day you do your pilaf and quiz. Your knife skills that you need to know, you might want to write this down. You need to know how to do a julienne. You need to know how to do a brunoise. You need to know how to do a paysan. You need to know how to do a chiffonade. You need to know how to do a small dice.
You're all small bits now.
I will be checking size and uniformity. So it's about taking your time and knowing what you're supposed to be doing before you get there. Because if you stand there for 20 minutes and contemplate what exactly is a julienne, then I know you haven't studied. Because I have yelled at that, I had yelled that to you for the past year. So you guys should know what a julienne looks like. Still a little crunchy.
What I think I need to look at is the paysan or
The paysan.
paysan. So I know what julienne, brunoise, chiffonade, and small is.
Which one is the present? I forgot that one.
Is the Scrabble tile.
Oh, like the one where it's like
Oh, the
the
square.
square, but it's not like too thick.
Mm-hmm. It's almost done. I'm just gonna evaporate some of the extra liquid. So if you want to grab a plate, you can, and a fork, Mr. Bubbles. Then Hannah, can you give me the Parmesan cheese that's in there? In the I think it's in the white fridge.
Oh dang, how much I be?
Now the risotto is a little on the crunchier side than I would like, but for time's sake, you'll at least get to taste the flavor. Alright, so once your rice is good, you are going to make sure that there's no extra liquid. If there is, tilt your lid so that it will evaporate, but you don't want it to burn, so you need to stir it a couple times. You're going to use a fork just to fluff it. We don't want to basically make risotto out of it, so you don't want to sit there and like stir it till it becomes gluten-y, but you want to kind of fluff it with a fork. And then it is ready to be served. You can add a little parsley to that. You can add a little salt and pepper to that. Make sure you taste it before you add any more salt, because again, your broth is rather salty. I'm going to garnish my risotto with a little Parmesan cheese. Again, you're going to get salt there, so we refrain from extra salt until you taste it. Go a little bit longer, it's still kind of wet. Alright, so if you want to come and taste the risotto, here it is. It's so pretty. That beautiful color.
Too pretty to be eaten.
It is a little on the crunchier side, so some people like it. Some people go a little bit farther. Which is really why it's hard to do for competition, because some judges like it different ways.
I like the steak.
Yep.
Thank you.
I don't do very well. It seems like I don't like it crunchy, so I tend to overcook it.
Overcook it?
It's just like mush.
Yeah, it's like
I don't do that.
That's really good.
rice is, pilaf is ready.
Like rice, but
So if you want some pilaf, there's pilaf as well. So, two different kinds of rice, long grain rice, short grain rice. Typically we use short grain rice in soups, and we use them in risottos because they slough off that nice starch. Long grain rice, they hold their shape a little bit better, so we use them for anything from sticky rice to rice pilaf to just chicken and rice. I stop stirring it and squishing it. So that, like, they missed the whole thing because this has been sitting in front of them. That is your rice pilaf. Right there. It's nice and fluffy, dry to an extent.